Love lives here.
Thank you, band. So humble and kind. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a roundabout way today. A roundabout way. but so my question for you is: have you ever felt that you were not being heard, that you were not being understood, and that cultural differences in a conversation kept you from being completely understood, or you understanding the other person that you're involved in the conversation with? Have you ever felt that you didn't have a voice? That's a question. Yeah, I think we all have, right? But so the talk title today is Compassionate Communication with a Twist. And the twist is going to be through ritual and storytelling. Is that all right with you? Yeah. All right, so let's get started. So, we're in this tradition, this philosophy called science of mind, right? So at the core of our teaching, we're taught or reminded, if we already know but we have maybe have forgotten, that our thoughts are creative and that the way we think shape our reality. So Dr. Ernest Holmes emphasized that everything begins with consciousness and that we hold in our minds, what we hold in our mind, we manifest into form and into our lives. Correct? With me so far? So this idea aligns with the power of story, song, and symbolism in various cultures and cultural traditions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. In cultures like an African culture, the Native American culture, or indigenous people, storytelling, music, and spiritual practice were all forms of communications that shaped people's beliefs, perceptions, and actions. Can we all agree to that? So I have a story for you. You know I love stories. This story is called The Story of the White Buffalo Calf Woman, and it's a Lakota tradition. One of the most sacred teachings about communication and compassionate communication, and connects the tribe. So long ago, during a long struggle, two Lakota scouts were walking through the plains when they saw a beautiful woman dressed in white buckskin approaching. She radiated light and wisdom. One of the scouts had impure thoughts and tried to approach her with disrespect, but in an instant, she turned them into dust. The other scout, filled with reverence, knelt before her. So she introduced herself as White Buffalo Calf Woman and taught the Lakota people sacred ways to live in harmony. She brought them the sacred pipe, which symbolizes the breath of life and the importance of speaking truth with love and respect. She taught that all communication should honor the connectedness of all beings, humans, animals, and with nature. But before she left, she promised to return one day, bringing unity and peace. And as she walked away, she transformed into a white buffalo as a sign of hope and spiritual renewal. So today, when we talk about compassionate communication and the science of mind, a PhD called Marshall Roseberg also calls it nonviolent communication. And it's a process of communication that focuses on empathetic listening, understanding, and speaking from a place of compassion rather than judgment or defensiveness. And so, strategies for speaking truth with kindness would be truth and kindness are not opposites of each other, they're companions. Speaking truth does not require harshness, it requires clarity, it requires courage, care, and care. And when we align with spirit, we recognize that truth spoken in love lands differently than truth spoken in judgment. Would you agree to that? So the questions that we must ask ourselves before speaking is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? And does it deserve connection and understanding? You know, oftentimes we just kind of speak and not knowing. And so I have a friend that used to say, loose lips sink ships. So you have to be intentional about what you're going to say and how you say it. Because sometimes I know I read text messages and I'm like, what? What did she say? You know, but maybe that wasn't the intention behind it. So I have to stop, take a pause, and read it again. And then I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. She didn't mean to throw shade. So even when correction or difficult conversations are needed, they can be framed with respect and dignity. Instead of saying, you're wrong, we can say, I see it differently. And can we explore this together? And that way it can bridge the gap and make the conversation more compassionate. So the core of compassionate communication involves observing without judgment, focusing on the facts rather than the interpretation or accusation, like I do in my text messages and my email, and expressing feelings, sharing how we feel in relation to what has happened, and identifying needs, understanding what is needed to meet the emotional and the practical needs, making requests, asking for specific actions that would improve the situation. So right now, sometimes when I'm talking to my grandkids, I'll say, repeat what I said. Or when I'm talking to someone, what I say is, I understand you to say X, Y, Z. And then they can say, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Or no, I meant something else. This is what I'm really saying. And so I have to repeat it again. So I understand you're saying, because my understanding and what they're communicating may be different, depending on where I come from and what lens am I looking through or hearing it through with my ears, because it's all based on our perceptions, right? So its principle aligns closely, this principle of conscious communication, compassionate communication, and observing without judgment aligns closely with the science of mind, as both emphasizing understanding the needs of ourselves and of others, and using positive, life-affirming languages to create connection and healing. And actually, the PhD, Rosenberg, he actually called it, I'm trying to find where he called it. He gave it a name, language of life, compassionate communication, our nonviolent communication. He called it the language of life. So we can learn something from that. So storytelling has always been a powerful way to preserve history, share wisdom, and inspire change. And so I'm going to give you some names of some great storytellers. But do you have some great storytellers in your family? You know, maybe you were small and you sat down with grandpa and he told these stories, or grandma and she told these elaborate stories. There's some great storytellers in here. Have you ever sat down and talked to Tomorrow? Or Stuart, Dinah says Stuart, or Chester. And Dinah and I had a great conversation this morning about I touched her face with my hands, and she was reminded of her mom. So I just wanted to, bring that up. But how does that feels good, doesn't it, when we can remember? And maybe when Grandpa was talking, you were like, okay, here Grandpa goes again. But now back as adults, and when we reflect on those conversations, we can appreciate it with reverence, can't we? I know I can. So some great storytellers that we may know. I have heard of Rumi, William Shakespeare, Hans Christian Andersen. I love his stories. Maya Angelou, Brene Brown, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Lao Tzu, the Buddha, Jesus, Paramahansa Yogananda, and guess what? Ernest Holmes. So each of these writers have contributed to our understanding of spirituality, whether through ancient wisdom, mystical experiences, or modern insights of mindfulness, consciousness, and divine connection. Ernest Holmes reminds us that all people are expressions of the divine. And when we listen with an open heart, we are witnessing God in one another or in another. So, in the same way that sacred texts, including the Bible, which evolved from an oral tradition, a storytelling tradition, and then was written into scripture, we create connection through our shared stories. Our stories and words have the power to shape our hearts, heal wounds, and uplift the human spirit. I was uplifted by the conversation with Dinah this morning. And when we use compassionate communication to foster understanding, we're building bridges and creating a deeper connection with our communities and the people in our communities. So what is the lesson of the buffalo calf woman? She teaches that our words carry sacred power, that we are to use them with reverence. Our words, and the Bible says in the beginning there was the word. So that means that everything comes forth from our mouth is creative. So we must speak with love. We must speak with truth and respect. This is how we honor the divine in each other and bring harmony to our relationships, in our community, and to the world. There was a Doctor Who episode. I love Doctor Who. Who in here loves Doctor Who? I love all of them. I love all of them. There was an episode where, I don't know, something was happening to the doctor, and Martha Jones was going around and she was telling everybody, and they thought it was a weapon. She was sharing that she had this weapon that would annihilate the master. And so she was going around talking to all these people, and she traveled from city to city, continents, and all over. And it was one thing. And at a certain time, they would say his name, the doctor. So what would it be if we communicated love and that, and shared that all the time and spoke that all the time? But how would it be if we all came together one great time and we just spoke love out into the world? I had the pleasure of meeting the scientists that did the hidden messages in water. And he said that a group of priests or monks went out to this lake that was just polluted. And they just prayed over the lake, prayed over the lake, prayed over the lake, and the water began to clear up. So in our thinking and in our hearts, if we send out love in the world, that can change our world. I believe it to be so. So in the science of mind, we recognize our interconnectedness. And in some cultures, again, storytelling, they use music. They use the drums. The Native American culture used drums not only for ceremonial purposes, but also a way to tell stories and to pass on history. The drums carry deep cultural meaning and calls people together and even connects them to the spirit world. And the drums also provide a foundation for song and dance and recounting historical events and expressing emotion. How many of you have ever been to a powwow? It's beautiful, it's sacred, it's magical. So our cultures also have unique methods of storytelling and communication: music, rhythm, symbols, African drumming, the talking drums. Indigenous Australians, the didgeridoo. In Celtic traditions is chanting and the musical harp. And the native South Americans are the panpipes and the flutes. And then Hawaiian culture, it's the chants and the hula dancing and the dancing with the hands. I did hula, I love it. It's so magical. So drumming, music, chanting, and stories have the power to dissolve barriers and remind us of what? Our shared humanity. So by weaving a tapestry of understanding and breaking through divisions of race, religion, and ideology, all that can happen through song, through drumming, through storytelling. So Science of Mind teaches us that by changing our thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions, we can transform our circumstances. And this principle aligns with the cultural traditions of storytelling, music, which resonates deeply to hold the power to shape our experiences. So to practice compassionate communication, we must first acknowledge our oneness with spirit. Everybody acknowledge their oneness spirit. I am one with spirit. I am one with spirit. This begins with affirming that God, spirit, resides within each and every person, that there is an inherent worth and divine potential in each person, in all beings. And compassionate communication involves listening with empathy, recognizing our humanity with others, and honoring the sacredness of each individual. It's about speaking with kindness and love, deeply attuning to feelings and needs, the needs of not just ourselves, but the needs of others. So when we share our personal experience tomorrow, Chester, Dinah, and many of you, we can create a space for mutual reflection and connection, right? I was thinking, what stories have I heard? You know, Dinah was saying, touch her mom face to face after coming out in the cold, and her mom was warm because she was in the home, and they both enjoyed that. And I was thinking to myself, what stories do I remember from my mom or my grandmother? By honoring the sacredness of each person's story, we use storytelling as a tool for healing. And in doing so, we can affirm that all our needs are met, and that we are supported, and that we are supporting others. So, how does this relate to the principles of science of mind? We recognize the power of stories using songs and ritual as a vehicle for expressing truth, spirituality, and empowerment. We learn from the wisdom of other cultures and ancestry, seeing how they communicate the universal truth about the divine interconnectedness of all life. And then we practice compassionate communication to create compassionate, clear, constructive dialogue rooted in the belief that we're all worthy of love, that we're all worthy of respect, and that we're all worthy of being understood. So we listen with a heart of compassion. We practice deep listening. We pause before responding. We take a breath to center ourselves. We reflect back to what we're hearing. I hear that you feel frustrated because, or whatever the conversation may be. And we release judgment or preconceived notions of what the person is about to say. Have you ever been in a conversation? And this is one of my pet peeves. Talking to somebody and they're like, yeah. I haven't even gotten it out yet. Yeah. Or having a conversation with someone and they're already getting their answer ready. Please try to understand what I'm saying first before you come up with a rebuttal. I have to remind Daryl that all the time. Don't tell him. Don't tell him I said so. I said, you're not listening and I'm not finished what I'm going to say. Because he's already saying, yeah, and we should do this. And what about that? And I'm like, I haven't even gotten it out yet. So, listening is one of the most profound acts of love. So often we listen and respond too quickly rather than actually understanding what the person is trying to communicate. So compassionate listening requires patience and practice and some humility. And we can go to our tables now. Compassionate communication, stories, songs, drumming, and these two tables talked about music, the great equalizer, and You know, you feel something when you're in a room with like-minded people. You're all singing the song. I have a funny story, and then I'll finish. So, anybody know Frankie Beverly and Mays? Great band. He just passed away. But the last song they always sing is "We Are One." It's beautiful, and everybody's doing this, and everybody's in the groove until we get in the parking lot, and we're trying to get home. We are one at the concert, but when we're in the parking lot trying to get home in this traffic jam, if you've ever been to the Greek Theater, we're not one then. So anyway, so, you know, when we sing and we tell stories, you know, we can bridge the gap. We can find our commonality and we can understand each other. And when we listen with a heart of compassion, we have to be courageous. We have to listen without fear, because fear is what keeps our minds closed. It what separates us and keeps us apart. And fear also stirs up judgment. When we see someone from maybe a different culture or having a different lifestyle, the first, if we start judging, it's because we're afraid of that. We're not comfortable with it yet. But when we talk to people and we learn about them and they tell us their stories and we tell them ours, we can break down those barriers. We can build bridges and not walls. So your homework, tools for thriving. The power of the pause. Before responding in a conversation, take a breath, reflect, and choose words that align with love and understanding. Number 2, the 80-20 rule for listening. Spend 80% of the time truly listening and only 20% speaking. When people feel heard, the connection with them deepens. And then number 3, use I statements. Express emotions and needs without blame. For example, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," say, "I feel unheard when I don't get a chance to share my thoughts." And then number 4, you can practice reflective listening. Repeat back what I told you I do, what someone says in your own words to show understanding before responding. And that's it. And so it is.